What if the loneliest place you've ever been wasn't a physical location, but the interior landscape of your own life, a place where you exist fully, yet remain completely unseen? It begins as a subtle contraction in the diaphragm, a reflexive stillness that takes hold before you even realize you have stopped moving. You are in a crowded room, perhaps a family dinner or a workplace meeting, and you feel the impulse to speak rise in your throat. But just as the thought forms, a secondary mechanism engages a rapid, silent calculation that predicts the outcome of your sound. The calculation returns a negative result. So the impulse is swallowed, the breath is held, the moment passes. You watch the conversation flow around you like water around a stone. You are physically present, occupying space, reflecting light, yet you experience a profound sense of transparency. It is not that you are hiding. Hiding implies a deliberate attempt to conceal oneself from a seeker. This is different. This is the sensation of standing in plain sight and remaining unregistered by the optical processing of those around you. Your nervous system begins to downregulate. Your heart rate slows. Your muscles loosen not in relaxation, but in a state of low-grade dormancy. You become efficient at occupying the negative space, the gaps between other people's interactions. This state is often mistaken for a personality trait. You might tell yourself you are simply observant or that you prefer listening, but observation requires a subject and an object. What you are experiencing is a dissolution of the subject. It is a semantic erasure where the boundaries of your self-concept become porous, not to let the world in, but to let your own signal bleed out until it matches the static of the room. You have learned to metabolize your own presence to avoid the metabolic cost of rejection. But the body does not disappear without a price. To the external world, your silence is not read as a deficit. It is read as a feature. You are often described with words that imply a convenient solidity, grounded, easygoing, or the deeply misleading low maintenance. In childhood, you are likely praised for being mature for your age, or described as an old soul. Adults valued these traits in children because they required minimal caloric expenditure from the caregiver. A child who self-soothes, who occupies themselves quietly in a corner, who demands no engagement, is viewed as a success of temperament. This misinterpretation follows you seamlessly into adulthood. In relationships, you are the partner who creates no drama. In the workplace, you are the employee who generates no friction. People gravitate toward you not because they are engaging with your depth, but because you offer a frictionless surface that does not distort their own reflection. They assume your lack of demand stems from a deep well of self-sufficiency. They believe you do not ask because you do not need. This assumption is clinically dangerous because it reinforces the very mechanism that isolates you. Every time you are complimented for your independence or your calm demeanor, the containment field strengthens. You cannot correct them without shattering the persona that secures your safety. To speak up now, to reveal the urgency behind the silence, would feel like a violation of an unspoken contract. You remain the good listener, the steady hand. But there is a distinct neurological difference between a calm sea and a pressurized vessel. The observers see peace. They do not register the energy required to maintain a vacuum. They see a lack of movement and label it stability. They fail to understand that holding one's breath indefinitely requires significantly more metabolic energy than breathing, and that the low-maintenance machine is actually burning fuel at a critical rate just to remain invisible. Over time, this accumulation of unexpressed signal creates a specific type of internal erosion. It is not a dramatic collapse. It is a slow, oxidative stress on the psyche. When you habitually suppress your needs to maintain the comfort of others or to avoid drawing negative attention, you do not simply delete the need. You force the nervous system to metabolize the disappointment internally. The energy that should have gone into expression is turned inward, where it circulates as a low-grade corrosive anxiety or a heavy, blank numbness. Consider the cognitive load of constant monitoring. To successfully navigate the world as the ignored child, you must maintain a state of high-frequency vigilance. You are constantly scanning the emotional baseline of the room. You track the pitch of voices, the force with which a door is closed, the subtle cadence of footsteps in the hallway. You become an expert in the meteorology of other people's moods. This scanning runs in the background of your mind like a heavy operating system, consuming a vast percentage of your available processing power before you have even spoken a word. As a result, you often experience a fatigue that sleep cannot touch. It is a depletion born of chronic inhibition. Every time an impulse creates a spark, I want this, I dislike that, and you reflexively smother it, you are exerting force. The act of holding back is a muscular, neurological action. Doing this hundreds of times a day for decades results in a systemic weariness. You may eventually find yourself unable to identify simple preferences, such as what you want for dinner or how you wish to spend your free time. This is not indecisiveness, this is atrophy. The neural pathways responsible for identifying and asserting desire have been systematically underused, while the pathways responsible for detecting threat and accommodating others have been hypertrophied. You are an athlete of adaptation, but your self-definition has withered from lack of blood flow. The exhaustion you feel is the precise cost of maintaining a discrepancy between who you are and who you are permitted to be. The mechanism at work here is rooted in the fundamental architecture of the developing brain, predictive processing. The human brain is not merely a reactive organ. It is a prediction machine designed to anticipate the sensory consequences of your actions. It operates on a continuous feedback loop. In a neurotypical developmental environment, an infant creates a sound and a caregiver responds. This creates a closed loop. Action A yields result B. This loop validates the existence of the self as an agent of change in the world. It signals to the nervous system, I exist and my output impacts my environment. However, in the context of the ignored child, this loop is severed. When you reached out and were met with indifference, absence, or distraction, your brain registered a prediction error. The energy expended to signal your needs yielded a zero-sum return. The brain, being a ruthlessly efficient organ, interprets this as a metabolic failure. To correct this error, it does not instruct you to scream louder that would be dangerous and energetically wasteful. Instead, it instructs you to stop signaling. This process initiates a state known in behavioral psychology as extinction. The neural pathways associated with asserting needs or expressing emotion are gradually inhibited because they are deemed non-functional. The brain effectively prunes the impulse to connect before it reaches your conscious awareness. Over time, this shifts your baseline autonomic state. You move out of the ventral vagal state, the state of social engagement and safety, and settle into a chronic dorsal vagal dominance. This is the oldest, most primitive defense system in the body. It is the immobilization response. In the wild, this is the mechanism an animal uses to play dead when a predator is inescapable. In your daily life, it manifests as a numb withdrawal, a turning down of the internal volume until you are functionally invisible. The system dampens your heart rate, lowers your affect, and creates that familiar sensation of being frozen or stuck when you try to speak. This is not a personality flaw. It is a biological success. Your nervous system successfully adapted to an environment where you were not seen by making you unseeable. It protected you from the pain of unrequited signaling by shutting down the signal tower. But this explanation, precise as it is, leaves a critical variable unaccounted for. If the brain is so efficient at extinguishing non-functional behaviors, and if silence was the optimal survival strategy, why does the suppression of the self still register as pain? Why has the mechanism failed to delete the longing along with the voice? You have likely internalized this silence as a definition of your character. You label yourself introverted, passive, or perhaps defective. You believe you were ignored because your signal was too weak to be picked up. This is a falsehood derived from incomplete data. This is not a failure of transmission. It is a failure of reception that forced a shutdown of the transmitter. What you experience as a personality trait is actually the scar tissue of adaptation. When a neurological pathway is used repeatedly, it becomes the default highway of the mind. The you that sits quietly in the corner is not your authentic self. It is your survival avatar. It is a version of you designed to minimize the surface area exposed to rejection. The brain does not care about your self-actualization. It cares about your biological efficiency and physical safety. In the environment of your development, being small was safe, being loud was dangerous. Therefore, you became small. This implies a startling reality. The personality you identify with is largely a construct of defense. You are not low maintenance by nature. You are low maintenance by necessity. You have mistaken the armor for the skin. The disconnect you feel is not because you are empty. It is because the connection lines were cut to prevent a short circuit. Your machinery is functioning exactly as it was programmed. It is preserving the organism by suppressing the life within it. The mechanism is a complete success. The silence keeps you safe, but the cost of this safety is that the armor is now suffocating the very thing it was built to protect. This survival algorithm does not remain contained within the boundaries of your childhood home. Because the brain is a prediction machine, it projects past data onto future environments. It creates a seamless continuity between the room you grew up in and the world you inhabit now, effectively overlaying the old map onto new territory. The mechanism scales. It infiltrates every sector of your adult life, mutating slightly to fit the context, but preserving the core directive. Remain undetected to remain safe. Consider your professional existence. In the workplace, this pattern manifests as a pathological competence coupled with total invisibility. You are likely the person who knows exactly how the system works, who quietly fixes the errors of others, and who ensures the project crosses the finish line. Yet, you are rarely the one on stage. You view the spotlight not as an opportunity for advancement, but as a threat to your equilibrium. When a manager asks for feedback or a salary negotiation looms, the dorsal vagal brake engages. You feel the familiar tightening in the throat. The logic circuits in your prefrontal cortex know you deserve more, but the survival circuits in your brainstem override them. You rationalize this silence. I don't want to be difficult, or the work speaks for itself, but the work never speaks for itself. In a hierarchy, silence is interpreted as satisfaction. You become infrastructure essential, load-bearing, but unnoticed until you break. You are treated like running water or electricity, expected to be there, but never thanked for flowing. Shift this lens to your romantic relationships. Here, the pattern is even more insidious. You likely attract partners who are high consumptive, people who take up a significant amount of emotional space. This is not bad luck. It is a mechanical fit. A person who needs to be the center of attention requires a partner who is comfortable living in the periphery. You are the perfect candidate. You enter relationships as a zero-friction partner. You pride yourself on not being needy. You anticipate your partner's needs before they even articulate them, a skill honed from years of scanning your parents for emotional volatility. You bypass their autonomy by fixing their problems before they occur. But this is not intimacy. It is anxiety masked as care. You are managing them the way you managed your caregivers, keeping them regulated so you don't have to face the terror of their displeasure. Eventually, you begin to feel a deep, resentful loneliness, not because you are alone, but because you are entirely unknown. You are loved for your function, not your essence. You have curated a relationship where you are indispensable, yet interchangeable. This erodes your capacity for decision-making in the most mundane aspects of life. When asked, "What do you want to eat?" or "What movie should we watch?" you likely experience a disproportionate spike in cortisol. Your mind goes blank. This is not a lack of preference. It is a learned inhibition. For years, expressing a preference opened you to the risk of it being ignored or mocked. Therefore, the safest answer became, "I don't mind," or "whatever you want." You have outsourced your volition. You have become a mirror that reflects the desires of whoever is standing in front of you, waiting for them to provide the script so you can play your part. Even your physical body bears the architectural load of this strategy. You may suffer from chronic tension headaches, jaw clenching, bruxism, or shallow upper chest breathing. These are the somatic signatures of a body that is constantly bracing for impact. You are holding a static muscular contraction, a physical attempt to occupy less volume in the physical world. The tragedy of this expansion is its efficiency. By successfully avoiding conflict in work, love, and life, you reinforce the very belief that imprisons you, that you only matter insofar as you are useful and you are only safe insofar as you are silent. You look at your life and see a series of compromises you don't remember agreeing to. You realize that while you have successfully survived the threat of being ignored, you have done so by ignoring yourself first. You have built a life that fits everyone else perfectly, but has no room for you. The contract you signed in childhood was simple. I will trade my voice for your tolerance. It was a logical trade for a dependent organism, but the terms of that contract have compounded. The interest rate on this suppression is exorbitant, and the bill is now due. By constantly dampening your internal responses to avoid conflict, you have not just muted the negative emotions, fear, anger, disappointment, you have engaged in emotional blunting. The nervous system does not have separate volume knobs for good and bad feelings. There is only one master fader. When you pull it down to survive the pain of being ignored, you simultaneously pull it down on joy, excitement, and passion. The world becomes less vibrant. You live in a grayscale reality where highs are flattened into contentment and lows are flattened into numbness. This leads to a specific form of alienation known as alexithymia, a functional difficulty in identifying and describing your own emotions. You feel something heavy in your chest, a dense pressure behind the eyes, but you cannot name it. Is it sadness? Is it rage? Is it grief? The labeling machine in your brain has rusted shut from disuse. You become a stranger to your own interiority. You look at others laughing or crying with a kind of anthropological curiosity, wondering how they access those raw states so easily, while you observe your own life from behind a pane of thick glass. Furthermore, the energy required to maintain this repression creates a biological debt. It often manifests somatically as autoimmune dysregulation, chronic inflammation, or inexplicable pain syndromes. The body is screaming because the mouth is shut. You have built a fortress so secure that even you cannot get out. You are safe from rejection, yes. No one can hurt you if you are already numb. No one can abandon you if you require nothing. But this safety is indistinguishable from a cage. You have spent decades perfecting the art of being low maintenance, only to realize that the person you are maintaining is no longer there. You are guarding an empty room. The external threat has long since passed. The parents are old or gone. The playground is empty. But the sentries are still pacing the walls of your mind, bayonets drawn, waiting for an enemy that has vanished, protecting a treasure that is turned to dust. There is no quick fix for a nervous system that has spent a lifetime wiring itself for invisibility. You cannot simply decide to be more confident any more than you can decide to lower your blood pressure by will alone. The architecture of your mind was built to withstand a specific load, the heavy, crushing load of silence, and it will not dismantle itself overnight. To change is to signal the brain that the war is over, even while the reflexes of the trenches remain active. This is a terrifying proposition. To speak, to want, to take up space, these actions still register as threat vectors to your amygdala. The moment you try to break the pattern, the biological alarm will sound. You will feel the urge to retreat, to apologize, to fade back into the wallpaper where you have always been safe. This is the quiet, unresolved tension where you now stand. You are becoming aware of the mechanism, but awareness is not the same as freedom. It is merely the light switch flipping on in the prison cell. You can see the bars now. You can see the lock. You understand with devastating clarity exactly why you built them. The question that remains is not how to escape, but whether you can tolerate the vertigo of being seen. Can you endure the terrifying exposure of having a self, knowing that it might be rejected? Or is the certainty of your own erasure still safer than the unpredictable chaos of being known? The silence has kept you alive this long, but at what point does survival stop being enough? This is the question that will define the next chapter of your existence. The armor you wear is real. The threat you adapted to was real, but the environment has changed, and you are no longer that powerless child scanning the room for emotional landmines. You are an adult with agency, resources, and the capacity to choose a different operating system. The first step is not courage, it is curiosity. You must begin to study your own patterns with the detachment of a researcher observing a fascinating specimen. When you feel the impulse to speak and then swallow it, pause. Notice the physical sensation. Where does the contraction occur? What thought accompanies the shutdown? You are not trying to fix it yet. You are simply collecting data. You are learning the language of your own nervous system. Next, you must practice micro-expressions of self in low-stakes environments. This is not about dramatic revelations or confrontational declarations. It is about rebuilding the atrophied neural pathways one repetition at a time. Order what you actually want for lunch instead of deferring to the group. Express a mild preference about which route to take. Disagree gently with a minor point in a conversation. These small acts are not trivial. They are weight training for a system that has forgotten how to lift. You will need to develop what psychologists call distress tolerance, the capacity to sit with the discomfort that arises when you break your own rules. When you assert a boundary or express a need, your nervous system will scream danger. Your heart will race. You will want to immediately retract what you said, to smooth it over, to disappear. This is the moment of transformation. You must learn to tolerate the sensation without reacting to it. Breathe through it. Observe it. Remind yourself that discomfort is not the same as danger. Consider working with a therapist trained in somatic or trauma-informed modalities. Traditional talk therapy can be useful, but the patterns we are discussing are pre-verbal. They live in the body, in the autonomic nervous system, in the reflexes that fire before conscious thought. You need someone who understands how to work with the nervous system directly, who can help you complete the defensive responses that were frozen in childhood and discharge the stored activation that keeps you locked in shutdown. Build relationships with people who have the capacity to see you, even when you are not performing utility. This is perhaps the most difficult task because it requires you to believe you are worth seeing. You will be tempted to default to caretaker roles, to make yourself useful so you have a reason to be included. Resist this. Practice receiving without reciprocating immediately. Practice being messy, uncertain, or needy. Test whether the relationship can hold you when you are not holding it together. Here is what I need you to understand. You are not broken. You are not defective. You adapted brilliantly to an impossible situation. But the situation has changed, and the adaptation is now the prison. The bars are made of your own breath, held for so long that you have forgotten what it feels like to exhale. If this resonated with you, if you recognize yourself in these patterns, I want you to do one thing right now. In the comments below, write one word, just one word, that describes what you are feeling in this moment. Not what you think you should feel, not what sounds profound. Just the raw, true word. Let it be messy. Let it be simple. Let it be yours. This is your first exhale. Take it.